Great Britain will not get rid of the European Union, and vice versa. Everything is not easy either. And there's still a lot to be settled. Disputes and negotiations will remain. Brexit is over. Great Britain is experiencing its first days as a free and independent state from the EU, as represented by the British government. But flag-waving enthusiasm cannot be felt in the country. Instead, the British realized that interdependence with the EU still exists. Now it is only formulated on 1,386 pages of a trade agreement and has to be rebalanced over and over again over the years in constant negotiations. In reality, nobody is independent, as examples from the life of the trade agreement show. The Brexit hardliners in the Conservative Party, the so-called ERG, the European Research Group, have confirmed Prime Minister Boris Johnson in a legal report that the agreement guarantees the much invoked sovereignty. And the reason is, the European Court of Justice no longer plays a role in the relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU, with the exception of Northern Ireland, unlike the EU actually wanted. Disputes are not brought before the ECJ, but are dealt with by an independent body, the Joint Partnership Council. That is what the British government wanted. In case of doubt, the dispute ends up before a tribunal which can make decisions. Neither side may impose arbitrary, disproportionately harsh penalties on the other side. The EU initially wanted to secure this freedom. However, if it can be proven that one side, for example through unlawful aid, distorts competition and causes serious economic damage to the other side, punitive tariffs may be applied across all economic sectors. The EU prevailed there. If one side grossly violates the agreement, the entire agreement can be terminated. That's a so-called guillotine clause, which also applies to Switzerland. It is important for the British that they are independent when it comes to the rules on fair competition, the famous level playing field, and that they do not have to slavishly copy the social, environmental, climate and employment standards of the EU. Their own new rules must not have any drastically different effects on the economy, so they must not deviate significantly from the EU standards, even in the long term. It's all about the effect. It is important that the other side is not demonstrably seriously damaged and that competition is undermined. If so, the other side, for example the EU, can react with punitive tariffs. So it can restrict British market access. The United Kingdom is then not forced to change its, for example, lax labour market regulations, but the United Kingdom can accept the tariffs. That means accept limited market access to the EU. The Brexit hardliners say it will be difficult for the EU to prove its economic damage in front of the Independent Arbitration Board. The British government must argue hard and consistently. It remains to be seen whether the British government will actually change regulations, as Johnson once argued before the EU referendum. What exactly the government envisions under the tax-saving free ports and economic zones that it is planning has yet to be determined. The use of the freedom to regulate in terms of social and employment standards is also not yet clear. The British government, for example, has a problem with the EU Working Time Directive. It defines the 48-hour week. The unions, however, have already pricked up their ears. Great Britain already has used the freedom to set its own rules. In case of the VAT, the government has abolished the so-called tampon tax, which cannot be reduced below 5% in the EU. Germany lowered the VAT on hygiene products from 19% to 7% at the beginning of the year. The greatest relief for both sides is, of course, that the agreement enables duty-free and quota-free trade across borders. It is currently quiet at the borders due to the holidays. That will change in the coming days. Despite trade agreements, correct export papers must be presented at the borders, and many UK exporters still struggle with this. In addition, the planned new digital customs system in Great Britain is not yet in place, and the new clearance system for the trucks and the alternative parking spaces are not yet ready. The EU has made provisions so that the UK cannot establish itself as a cheap production location at the gates of the internal market. The UK government wants to promote new technologies such as robotics, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, genetic research, and, for example, the production of electric cars. But the EU has a lever. If the British want to export their cars duty-free to the EU, for example, the non-European share of vehicle parts must not exceed 45%. Otherwise, there will be customs duties, so the car will be more expensive. That doesn't work with electric cars. Most of the batteries for them are from Japan, Korea and China. If these high-quality batteries are installed, the non-European share of the vehicle increases so much that the vehicles cannot actually be exported to the EU duty-free. There is now an exception and transition period until 2026. By then, at the latest, Great Britain will have to replace non-European batteries with in-house production. Then customs duties will finally apply precisely when the market becomes important for EU manufacturers. Not everything was regulated in the free trade agreement. The EU internal market consists of 4 pillars: free movement of persons, an as yet non-existent EU capital market, free trade for goods and a market for services. The independent security and defense policy was not dealt with at the request of the British. The agreement that has now been concluded also only relates to the free trade of goods and small areas of common services. That's post, payment transactions and the like. Most of the services are not regulated by the agreement. Even the British professions are not recognized in the EU. A British architect cannot simply offer his services in the EU. A lawyer cannot simply advise. The same applies to financial services. Contrary to what the British government initially wanted, the EU has not granted City of London permission to do business in the EU. Rather, Great Britain is now applying, depending on the business area, for approval, as is provided for in most EU directives for third countries. That will work, but London is now dependent on how the EU tax authorities decide. Since the EU has not yet recognized British swap trading, for example for EU banks in London, the London EU banks will have to run their swaps through the EU from Monday. The London financial regulator approved this at short notice, but now the business is shifting from London to the EU. An advantage for the British is London can pay its bankers better in the future, and what's almost more important, the United Kingdom, especially the real estate market, will continue to benefit from the close financial interactions with its offshore locations in the future. The EU has long insisted that the people behind the offshore companies be declared, who have evaded taxes and black money is invested in the EU. Great Britain has now got rid of these probing inquiries. And that probably was one of the reasons why some people pushed for Brexit. In recent years, more than £200 billion investment capital has flowed into the country through foreign offshore companies, according to the regulatory authority in Jersey. The British government has given in on the fish issue, though. In the course of the next 5.5 years, the EU will have to give up 25% of its catch quotas in British waters. British fishermen are accordingly allowed to catch more, but in absolute catches that doesn't matter much. Scottish fishermen will benefit though. Almost nothing will change for the coastal towns in England. The EU will continue to fish 90% of the cod there. Overall, the quota of fish that the British are allowed to catch in their waters will increase from currently 50 to 66% later. Then it's renegotiated. In theory, the British can refuse the EU access to their waters then. But up to 90% of the sardines and mackerel the British fish are for the EU market. For this, the British need duty-free market access. And not only that, the EU may also make it more difficult for the British to gain market access in other economic sectors if the EU fleet is no longer allowed to fish in the 200-mile waters of the United Kingdom. Mutual dependency cannot therefore be erased with the agreement. However, the British government has already made a decision. With immediate effect, electric fishing, which is still practiced in the Netherlands in particular, is prohibited in British waters, which digs up clods from the bottom with electric shocks and catches them in the nets. The method kills smaller fish species, but these are food source for larger fish, and thus kills the catch of British cutters. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel and my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.